Hi guys, and welcome to the third week of my reflection. Diving straight in, we started off the week by Dave introducing a new workshop, which was the protagonist workshop, which was an illustration based workshop. The main aims of the workshop were basically to identify how we can stylize and render protagonist characters in our own illustrative style. We explored a range of mediums, which included tracing paper and carbon paper. Not something I'd specifically used before, but I was intrigued and open to using it. It gave a quick and easy, not way out, but alternative to exploring how we could render characters in a lifelike way, getting proportions correct, much easier than essentially copying the piece. Throughout our linear renderings, we basically needed to explore the idea of mark making and how tonal values could be explored, so I did that specifically through hatching and cross-hatching. Throughout my own work, I tried to identify how the actual piece itself could be explored through character. So you can see how I use block colour to hide part of the character's frame, sort of identifying how this character is a mystery and a hidden element towards the actual, or his intentions within the film. I tried to go quite heavy with the amount of tone and line I ended up using, just to try and really emphasise and push that idea of mystery and eeriness to the tone of the scene itself. We went forward with these by identifying how we could develop these digitally. Even though it is an analogue process, this was our first and initial integration of analogue and digital incorporation. We did this by uploading and scanning the original piece, onto Photoshop and Illustrator, creating vectors which could be rescaled and resized to whatever need be, meaning we can just either push forward different colours or textures, like using the texture packs by Dave provided, onto the piece to really emphasise or change the overall aesthetic and emotion of the scene. Throughout my experimentation, I basically highlighted how the colour green would emphasise the eeriness and the organic qualities of the character. I wanted to try and highlight how, even though the colour green sort of means rich and jealousy, that the character's moral values could also be differed. I think it worked quite well. Obviously, with the textures laying over the top, it sort of gave this eroded and distorted effect to the character, sort of blurring away his moral views and viewpoints and everything like that. So overall, I'm really proud of the experiments I was able actually to produce. Going forward from there, I went on to develop the Expose and Replace workshop, which we completed last week. I did this using different mediums. I wanted to identify how I could once again take the concept of Expose and Replace and push it forward with paint. Whilst I haven't been the best with paint in the past, especially acrylic and normal poster paints, I found these paint pens, and this paint pen alongside the liner I've been using allowed me to isolate segments quite clearly within the frame. Yeah, basically inspired by the Expose and Replace workshop, I wanted to reintroduce that idea of block colour and tracing paper, something that we'd used at the beginning of the week, to reintroduce that idea of layering, and I think it worked out quite well. It worked particularly well within my original frame. Let's say that's the original frame underneath, with my first line work, or my first line rendering placed over the top. You can see when I introduced the idea of colour onto the actual piece itself, it highlighted the emphasis of the emotion within the scene. I say, obviously taken from Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey, the colour is a vibrant and impactful part of it, and continuing that pastel tones taken from my original 6 frames, it really emphasised the depth and layering of the character. I feel like you can easily identify how the softer colours, like the yellows, the greens and the blues, are pushed towards the background, while the most prominent figure in the middle, Dave, is going to be pushed forward due to the vibrant reds. I experimented further with these by laying them onto acetate so you can get that self-frame animation effect. I feel like it worked effectively well. I like the idea of this being something which the audience can almost interact with and look through, so they're almost seeing like a layered of depth between the actual pieces. I also wanted to look at how the piece could look in a negative light, really conflicting the colour change and the emotions which are depicted, almost as if the red is a more warm and inviting colour, obviously depicting hatred or rage, and then the eeriness of the blue and the cool colours almost give a dark tonal vibe to it. It's like off-putting in a sense. I went forward with that by looking in a monochromatic light, because I know some of the original Stanley Kubrick works that he worked on were in a monochromatic black and white screen scene, more like Henry Lang's work, who also worked on the actual film himself. Overall, I'm really proud of that test, and I'm glad with the developments I made. The paint pens weren't 100% effective, like they had a bit of an opacity to it, but when scanning them through the scanner onto acetate, it worked overly well, and it allowed me to explore how I could incorporate backgrounds and introduce other colours. So in the end I went for an orange background, as I feel like it complemented it, but it didn't push the colours back, it sort of pushed them forward, and it made the separation between background and foreground quite well indistinguishable. Overall, that piece of work, whilst I preferred the Expose and Replace workshop, I believe it had a larger impact upon the work that I've been able to develop and look at further. Whilst the paint pens worked okay, it didn't achieve the desired effect I was hoping for. Yet, it was effective in exploring a new medium. It's something I hadn't tried before, and I'm glad I actually took the time out to investigate and look at how I can incorporate different mediums itself. Whilst, because as I mentioned, I'm not too strong in paints or acrylic, so the paint pens offered a precise alternative towards exploring how I can incorporate such a different medium. Yeah, so definitely, overall, I'm happy with the work and the outcomes I managed to get this week. I would want to go even further with the Expose and Replace workshop. I feel like it's something that I might even ground my work upon in the future. Whilst Protagonist was okay, I liked the illustration style and the side to it, because it gave me a chance to identify how I can develop my strength of line, and I hope, and I most likely will use in the future, the idea of tracing paper and carbon paper to reflect and refine specific characters or get proportions correct within my frames. One other thing I want to highlight is how, even though there was a digital aspect to the Protagonist workshop, I can understand why Dave tried to integrate the two methodologies seamlessly, the idea of analog and digital, and I think to get that higher grade boundary which I want to achieve, that's something I have to look at in trying to get that seamless effect of working on something analog, bring it over to digital and bringing it back even to analog again, just to explore not only a range of tests but create an effective and finalised piece. Next week, though, I hope to basically identify begin to identify a range of artist influences. Whilst I've been doing tests and workshops that Dave has set out for us, I think it's time for me to work off the foundations I've created and really push forward on my own influences and ideas to help drive my work in the future. So I'm looking forward to that.